Our family lived in a small town of Mount Prospect, just side of Chicago. In the beginning, I was always close to Jesus because I had a very fine parents, very religious parents, and a very orderly parent, and everything was just always all right. We lived in this small town, and we didn't even have a policeman. Everybody knew what everybody else was doing. And I always prayed to Jesus to put me in the right religion, because there's so many religions. And therefore he brought me to the Unveiled Mysteries. And one day my brother-in-law came over to the house and said he wanted to see a crystal gazer so he could buy a car at the right date, so he'd have good fortune with a car. And I said I would take a ride with him because it was about 25 miles away, so he wouldn't have to ride by himself. Not that I cared about the crystal gazer, but so we went. And I was the first one at the door, and the man came to the door with a book in his hand. And he says, I saw you and your friend coming over here about 2 miles away, and the light was very bright around you. And the voice said to me that I should give you this book, that you would understand it right away, but I don't understand it at all, said the man. And he gave me the Unveiled Mysteries by Godfrey Ray King, who was Guy Ballard. And that's what started me up at the age of 22. A master gave a dictation and says 3,000 people will come in the activity tomorrow, and I was one of those. And I proceeded from the Unveiled Mysteries to the next book of the Magic Present, to the next book of the I Am Discourses, and just kept reading and following it to get to the decrees and learned the decrees and proceeded with the activity and got real busy with it as time went along. Half the people left when Godfrey didn't ascend out of the retreats. When I come into Summit, when I'm activity, the state's attorney for the federal state's attorney had the whole I Am activity under indictment for fraud, for putting pictures out of the masters that didn't exist, because they don't accept the masters, you see. And actually one time they were going to jail Lotus, and there's a law that you can take a place of somebody that's incriminated. I offer to take her place. So I've had my fingers in the pie at different places, you see. And it didn't take much time, and I was officiating in the sanctuary and taking care of the needs of Lotus that had to be done in and around the sanctuary, so everything was in order. In due course, that was in 1940. And in due course, the war started. If anybody thinks it takes a lot of effort to go to service once a week or 2 or 3 times a week, then listen carefully to this. We went to service every night for 3.5 years during the war class. The master said we stopped the war 4 years early and kept this country going in from dictatorship, which was already planned. So that's the background with that. And Lotus was always there, and she was an accomplished harpist. And on Fridays, we would only send adoration to the masters and not decree on that day, and we would have music all day long, called Encyclopedia the Elam of Music. And Lotus would get on the altar and play the harp and exchange with the Nova chord. And I was there with her personally. She would come on at 6 o'clock and leave at midnight and never leave the altar, never leave the room, just constantly play and play and play some more. Tremendous endurance. During the service, all the men always wore white suits. And we had no air conditioning, and everybody kept his jacket on all the time. It might be interesting for you to realize that without air conditioning, we had fans in the windows. They weren't portable fans, but they were part of the window. The fan was built into the window. But at that time, the slaughterhouse for the stockyard used to still be in Chicago, which there isn't there now. And on a warm day, it was an absolute terrible odor coming in all the time. But in the sanctuary, on the side of the outside, you could smell the stockyards, but it never blew it into the sanctuary. In that little space of blowing, even under the pressure of the fan, the odor never came into the sanctuary. It was always a pleasure for me to be an assistant to Lotus. And I traveled with her throughout the country many times. One time even took off from my work and went with her for 4.5 months through all different parts of the country with myself and my young daughter, whom I took care of at the time. We had many manifestations along the way. One time, I might mention one, where one of the Elohim gave a dictation, and he said, if you're ever in danger, just call to me and I'll take care of it. And he says, but remember, I can only intensify your light around you and your harmony, and you cannot have any fear. You have to have absolute trust in me if something happens to you. Well, in due course, something did happen, and somebody had me by the throat, and had some intentions on himself that were not very pleasing. And so I said quietly to the master, to the Elohim, I says, how are you going to handle this? Well, I'll keep my harmony, but how are you going to handle this? In the meantime, this guy's getting more violent as it goes along. But I kept my harmony with him, and the man from the street came and put his arms around this man and took him away. So I was very grateful for that. So I was in the I Am activity for 35 years, and Lotus had made the ascension by that time, and I figured there must be a messenger going around somewhere that the masters wouldn't leave it open the way it was. So I read a ad in the paper, in the Fate magazine, about Ascended Masters, and I figured, well, if we want to find out if it's real, we have to go to where they are. So we waited till they talked about having a conference in Minneapolis, which was close by to Chicago, and we went, and immediately I could tell that from my observation that Mother was real, and she was the representative of the Masters. I loved her when I saw her, and I loved her every day of my life since, forever and forever and forever and always. And after the service, she came out to the hallway and said, I'd like to meet you two people. My wife was with me at the time. And she said, I saw the light around you and I just wanted to know who you were. And after that, we became friends with Mother and the family, and our children grew up with her children, and we had a very good association through the course of years. We were at a conference one time, and Mother says, what really brought it up was that my wife was at the quarter, and she said to Mother that the pictures were still over in the IM activity, and the summit did not have the pictures. And those pictures, along with the chart, makes a terrific matrix that has a terrific radiation. And so my wife told Mother that I could probably be able to get it from, because I knew the people very well. So Mother asked me if I would go and try to get them. So I borrowed a van from somebody from someplace that was at the conference, and we drove up to Mount Shasta and bought it from the person who was taking care of Charles Sindler, who painted the pictures, taking care of his estate. And he had charge of these pictures, and I was very easily able to get it from him and brought them back immediately straight to the summit. We paid $1,000 apiece for the pictures, and at the same time we bought the picture of Cyclopeia that's at the back of the sanctuary, which we got a little bit later, and got that too. So we have that also. And since that time, Summit has had access to those pictures. So at this point, I've been in the teaching now for 63 years, diligently giving the violet flame. By God's grace, the matches have always kept me going in the right direction. We've had our ups and downs, which everyone has, but always the basic teaching of the mystery school has always been paramount in my mind, by God's grace. There was a city block in Chicago that I had possession of, but it didn't have a title to it according to the ordinary ways. So it couldn't be sold only to a special person who understood certificates, because I had ownership by certificate, which was a tax certificate. So I made the call to Kuan Yin and wrote it down, and over a period of time, it didn't happen tomorrow or something. It took some time, but I diligently kept visualizing that it would be sold. And one time I came back from a conference, and there was a lady there that didn't belong in that block, and I asked her what she was doing here, and she told me what she was doing, whatever it was. And I told her I would want to sell one of the buildings in that block. She said, I'll buy it. And I made the mistake of coming down $10,000 because she was ready to pay cash for it. And she says, come into my office tomorrow and I'll have the money for you. And she bought the certificate. And not only that, she answered my request as Kuan Yin and bought the whole block with her friend for cash and bought the whole bunch of certificates. It was a terrific manifestation. I always seem to be involved with complicated titles. It was a 12 flat that I was trying to acquire, and the lawyer that I had working on it didn't seem to be making any progress with it. Either he didn't understand it properly or he didn't have the right connections to go and get through to it. So I kept decreeing on it. And one day I was at a conference with Mother about it. She says, I'm going over to the other building. She says, come walk over to me and tell me about it. So I told her about it, and she went over there and stood in front of the chart. Just stand real tight behind me. real tight behind me, and she says, I'll make the call for you to get this building. And I went back to the city, and here some men showed up that owned the certificate, to whom I didn't even know who it was, and offered me the certificate for an absolute bargain. And there I had the 12 flat. It was an absolute manifestation. I might tell you another activity or a manifestation that was a terrific expression of protection. I was taking care of a building, 2-story building, and I walked up the back porch, and it had a little stairway going down to the basement, and then the next stairway going up to the second floor. There was a man sitting on the banister on the first floor when I went up. And I went up and did my business upstairs. And I came down. For some reason, I had a hammer in my hand for doing something up there. When I came down, the man jumped me right at the bottom of the stairs, of the second floor stairs, and knocked me down the basement stairs. All of this took about 2 minutes. And I kept waving the hammer and calling to Shiva. Could hear me down the block. Shiva, and I'm waving the hammer, and he's standing in front of me with a .38. And he can't get an aim at me because my hammer's swinging all the time. So he jumped up and jumped to the back of me, put the gun to my head, on top of my ear, and shot, and the bullet went through the wood to show you how close Shiva can protect you, even with a half an inch. As soon as he shot, he ran. He ran away. Oh, and the sequel to that is that the return current on this man, he entered into another conflagration with other people some months later and was shot dead. It's amazing. So by God's grace and by God's grace of Shiva, I'm still able to talk about this. Praise God.
Praise God.
But I don't recommend a situation like that to anybody. So being in the summit, I came in just after Mark. So I came in 75 so I didn't meet Mark, which would have been nice if I had. But he always recommended that he tell a story of some humor to it to relax the audience. And so I thought it would be nice to tell you something. So as he says, it says that Noah was the greatest financier of all time because he floated stock while the world was in liquidation. Then he told a story about a sage in India. A man approached him and said, "Could you tell me if I'm going to heaven?" And he says, "Yes, I could tell you if you go to heaven, but it would take me a week or so to meditate on it, and I will give you a result." So in due time, he saw this man again. He said, "You got any news for me?" He says, "Yes, I have news for you. I've got good news and I've got bad news." "Well, tell me the good news first. Am I going to heaven?" He says, "Yes, you're going to heaven." He says, "What could be bad news then?" He says, "You're leaving 6 o'clock in the morning." While I was in the IM activity, a man carved out an ascension chair, a duplicate of the ascension chair that sits in the retreat of Saint Germain. And in due course, he had it delivered to my house. Now, since I have it, we've been privileged to use it at every conference here lately, at each conference, so everybody can sit in it for a little bit. And various people have had most amazing experiences in it that it's absolutely startling. It's very important for the student body to realize of the great intense importance it is to listen to the patch. Saint Germain said he went to the central sun to get the technology for the patch, due to the fact that each student is decreeing with another student whom he doesn't see and will never meet in his whole lifetime and could be anywhere in the world. He is balancing karma, due to the fact that the amplification of decrees with the people in the room, because first of all, decrees expand from 3 times by 3, and then by 9, and then it goes by the 10, Maitreya's 10,000 times 10,000, and gets squared by the Buddha. In addition to that, it gets amplified by the patch. On this basis, Saint Germain says, I can guarantee your ascension, because the decrees you're giving are amplified sometimes more than 100,000 times at once, which if you decreed all day, every day, you could never give that many decrees. So on the basis that you can give that many decrees, I can guarantee you your ascension in this life. And that's what I have in mind for you. So pay attention, everyone, please, to listen to the patch, because that's where your God is made for sure. And I'm glad to release this information to you, although it's been put in a dictation, and perhaps we could play it more often for each one to hear it themselves. Having been in the activity for such a long time, it is best to remind you of the fact, and Saint Germain says it, and different masters say it, that it's vital to go to the Saturday service. Serapis Bey even said, if you don't go to Saturday service, you're not even a keeper. And Saint Germain says, there's not one thing you have of importance that's important for you to do on Saturdays, excepting to go to the Saturday service. Now I've seen it throughout the years, that as soon as people dwindle a little bit off, they're busy on Saturday, and they're busy on some other Saturday, and they're busy on some other conference time, and some years go by, because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a number of years. And years go by, and pretty soon they're gone a whole week or maybe 2 weeks, and pretty soon you don't hear from them at all. And there goes their whole embodiment when they had the ascension in the bag, absolutely in the bag, and their whole embodiment goes out the door, which is very saddened for me, because I know these people as friends and as associates in the activity, in both the IM activity and the summit. And I see these people completely turning around, and it's just so sad to see that happen, because their opportunity is so great. They just don't realize how vital it is to give the violet flame. But that must be done, and the violet flame has to be done privately as well as in the service, to keep your radiation up and to stay with the basics of the activity and the teaching of the mystery school. As a matter of fact, Moria says, if you don't want to accelerate, then go back to the Baptist. Moria says, because we need people who want to be serious. So it's very important to keep trying and trying and trying. And that's the way to get the victory. Praise God. There's another story of Lanello that teaches you to practice the presence. There were a bunch of top financiers having a meeting, and their meeting was over, and they said, let us go to Carnegie Hall. And they sent a man over to get them tickets, and they were sold out. He sent another man, tell them who we are, and they'll send you a ticket. He sent them, and they wouldn't sell. They said, can't be done. He says, well, we'll go ourselves, and if we can't do anything else, we'll buy the place. So they didn't know the way, so they went to ask somebody on the street. So they see a man walking on the street carrying a cello. He says, could you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall? Oh, he says, oh yes. Practice, practice, practice. So practice the presence and you'll get to the ascension too. Praise God. I get a charge out of that one.
I like that one.
There's another thing of very great importance that each one should know. That Alpha and Omega have a direct ray from the white fire throne room to electric peak. In addition to that, they have a path of light from their retreat to the grounds on the inner retreat, and the masters and the angels can go up and down without going through the astral at that point. In addition to that, when you're walking on the grounds of the inner retreat, you are walking, the masters say you are walking in the etheric at the same time as the physical. In addition to that, you should before you leave the heart, take off your shoes and socks and get your secret rays to go and touch the ground so you make contact, because the great central sun magnet power is under the ground. So I felt it was important that you know all these things if you haven't come across them, but they're all in the discourses.
Thank you.
When I was in the church, I was busy with the Sunday schools. And when I left the church, I turned in my resignation to the minister, and he was absolutely appalled at the fact that he brought up this little boy in the church, and this little boy was now a big boy and was challenging him. I figured he'd pick up the masters in a minute, but he didn't. He opposed it right away. So God bless him anyway. Well, it turns out that the masters have me still on the earth at this time, and that I'm one of the people who have given the violet flame for the longest continuous time. Ramakrishna came into embodiment in the United States to make his ascension. Ramakrishna was married to Francis Icky. Francis Icky was Blavatsky, and she was also St. Peter. She was also General von Steuben in the Washington's army. And he made his ascension out of the IM activity. I was good friends with Claire Louise Kenninger. We used to go out to eat together and travel together sometimes. So we were good friends. And I was good friends with Francis Icky too. When you get as old as me, you know, you don't have many old friends left at all. They're not around anymore. So who knows? I might be here when you guys are gone. I might be gone tomorrow. You don't know. The thing is, you got to be ready, you see, that's all. Got to be ready. When you reach up in the close to 90, most of your friends have already passed. You have to look at from a standpoint of of a livelihood, you have to think of it all over again to keep everything moving. But it makes you feel the oneness with your presence, because you just have to know that you and the presence are one. Your higher Christ self is within you, and that there's nothing more important in your life than that. And you proceed from there. And that will assure you your victory no matter what. Praise God. It's a good ending.